What do you think of the role of protest? I mean, you have extensively written about it. You won the Pulitzer Prize for your book.
I'm all for protest when there's not. I'll give you an answer in one sentence. I'm all for protest when an election's not coming up. Because protest can have a huge effect, slowly, steadily, not immediately. Almost immediately, the media, particularly in America, does its best to, generally speaking, to put protest down. But over a long haul, the March on the Pentagon ended up being a success. I've said this many times, but what Lyndon Johnson saw was that 50,000 middle-class people, middle-aged and young and a few old, came to Washington, paid their way to get to Washington with the prospect of being hit over the head with a club. And Lyndon Johnson was a very canny man. He knew there was one thing about middle-class people. They didn't like getting hit over the head with a club. And if they were going to spend their money to come to Washington to protest, he was sick. Because he knew if he paid the way of all the people who would come to support his war in Vietnam, he'd be lucky to get 5,000 people. So 50,000 to come this way in all fear and all determination, then there probably were somewhere between 5 million and 50 million behind them, and he didn't want to find out. It took something away from him. He brought in Clark Clifford at one point to ask him for an honest appraisal of the war in Vietnam. And Clifford said, it's a loser. Clifford was respected by Johnson because he was objective. He said, you're not going to win this war, you can't. And I think that led to, now we get into all the complications of history. It's never clean. So Johnson stepped down, Nixon came in. Nixon knew his advantage was to keep the war going for 4 years, to get reelected, et cetera, et cetera. Here we get into all the tangles. I'm saying we have to enter the land of the tangles.
Well, at the Republican convention, there are plans for a massive march of something like 250,000. Perhaps there'll be more.
I hope there's 500,000. 500,000. At my age, it gets harder to count. But the problem may well be whether they can get permission. With Bloomberg and Pataki there,
they've now gotten permission, but it's to march on the West Side Highway, which is quite far from where the convention is taking place.
It's a long walk from the Lower East Side, where it all started.
And so you approve of this protest?
Well, I approve of protests of all sorts, depending on their position, their timing. I never approve of a protest that I think is a folly. So my point is, this protest, yes, I approve if it's peaceful. If the marchers, if the leaders of the activists get across the notion that it'll be a disaster if there's too much rioting, and indeed suspect the people who are rioting, they might be on another payroll altogether.
Now, you have always called yourself a third-party man. What do you think about Ralph Nader?
I met him in Chicago the other day, about a month ago. He's the nicest, most decent politician I've ever met, but I do think he's doing what I'm afraid the left and the left of center is going to do on this one, is they're going to end up handing it to Bush before it's all over. And my feeling is this, that if Bush gets it, everything we do is restricted to Provincetown and San Francisco and places like that. That, in other words, if we want to really have a say in what's going on in our country and in the world, we absolutely, absolutely have to get Kerry elected.
And
Amy, let me finish one thought, which is we've got to curb our rage for the next 4 months. Not put it away forever. Far from it. Far from it. This rage is legitimate. But I think it's going to be much more powerful after Kerry's in. And the reverse is true if he isn't.
when you talk about curbing the rage, do you see a difference between now and 1968 in terms of how many people across the political spectrum are angry? I mean, you have now military families who are rising up, 1,000 dead U.S.
I know what you want to say. Let me interrupt because I really got to leave. There's more rage across the spectrum now. But I keep repeating, there's a profound conservatism in American life. There's a terror of excess in the average middle American. And if they're on, right now the election is so close that if the rage erupts and does silly and stupid things before the election, it's going to lose the election. Now, I could be dead wrong. I'm wrong half the time.
But I mean, I mean the conservatives that are mad. That's what I'm asking, if you see a difference between now and 1968 in terms of the number of conservatives who are mad.
Absolutely, yes.
Across, and
those are the ones I want to reach.
Yeah, and how do you suggest reaching them?
Moderation, that's what they live for. People are conservative because they're moderate.
But if the media covers nothing but a protest that becomes violent, if they ice out so much dissent, how do you reach?
My point is they can ice it out for a period. They can't keep icing it out. We are a force of outrage. I'm just saying this force, I'm just hoping that this force waits 4 months to express itself and then has its jubilee.